Sitting at the table at my son's wedding, I felt my 8-year-old grandson grab my hand. "Grandma," he whispered urgently, "we have to leave. Right now." I looked down at his pale little face as he asked me, "Didn't you see the note under the table?" Slowly, I bent down and picked up a folded piece of paper. When I read the words written on it, my blood ran cold. Table 8, add shellfish to the child's portion. My grandson had a deadly allergy to shellfish. The people who were supposed to be our new family had quietly planned his murder. But before I go on, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories travel. I never thought I'd be here, on the brink of disaster, on a day that should have been a celebration. My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old, and for a long time I believed our family had found its way back from tragedy. My son Michael lost his wife Clara in an accident 3 years ago, leaving him alone to raise our little Leo, who was only 5 at the time. I still remember that terrible day, the phone call that changed everything. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the phone rang. The grave voice of the police officer on the other end of the line informed me that Clara had been in a fatal accident on the highway. A truck lost control and she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The plate I was holding slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. That sound of breaking porcelain seemed to echo what was happening in our hearts. Michael completely fell apart. During the funeral, as the rain fell relentlessly, as if the sky were crying with us, he stood motionless in front of the casket, unable to say a word. Leo, so small and confused, tugged on my skirt, asking when his mommy was coming back. Every innocent question was a fresh stab in my chest. In the months that followed, my son buried himself in work as a form of escape. He left early and came back late, when Leo was already asleep. The child suffered more than any of us. He stopped talking. The sparkle vanished from his eyes, and I became his main support. Every night I would rock him to sleep, telling him stories about his mother, trying to keep her memory alive. "Grandma, did Mommy like the stars?" he asked me once, looking out the bedroom window. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said yes, that she loved to look at the night sky. I don't know if it was true, but in that moment, I wanted to build a bridge between him and the mother he'd lost so early. My niece, Lily, also became an essential part of our lives. An orphan since she was little, I raised her as if she were my own daughter. She came over almost every day bringing colorful books and sweets for Leo. She would sit with him on the living room rug, teaching him to read, helping him with his drawings, and treating him like a little brother. There was something special about the way she cared for him, an affection that went beyond simple attention. I would quietly watch how Lily's eyes followed Michael when he came home from work. There was more than just familial respect in that gaze, something that seemed to grow with each passing day. I never mentioned it, afraid of disturbing the fragile balance we had found. Our life continued in a quiet routine of mourning and adjustment, until Veronica entered the picture. Michael met her at work. She was the new marketing manager at his company. One autumn afternoon, he called me with a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special." That night, Veronica arrived at our house in a flawless red dress. Her smile seemed rehearsed, perfect, as if every muscle in her face had been carefully positioned. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Eleanor," she said in a melodious voice, while her eyes scanned every detail of the house, lingering on the photographs of Clara on the wall. I prepared a special dinner, the lasagna Michael loved so much, and homemade brownies for dessert. Veronica praised everything effusively. "This lasagna is divine, Mrs. Eleanor. You have to give me the recipe," she'd say between delicate bites and calculated smiles. I thanked her politely, but something inside me remained uneasy. Leo, usually talkative during dinner, remained completely silent. He poked at his food, keeping his head down, as if he wanted to become invisible. When Veronica pulled a chocolate bar from her purse and offered it to him, the boy simply turned his face away, not even reaching out his hand. Michael frowned, ready to scold his son, but I quickly intervened. He must be tired, I justified, trying to ease the tension. I noticed a flash of irritation in Veronica's eyes, so quick I almost doubted I'd seen it. Lily was also at dinner, sitting across from me, watching everything with attentive eyes. When Veronica took Michael's hand under the table, I saw how Lily's fingers tightened on her napkin, her eyes dropping to her plate. That silence said more than 1,000 words. After dinner, Veronica insisted on washing the dishes, despite my protests. "Let me help, Mrs. Eleanor. It's the least I can do." I watched her in the kitchen, with precise movements, organizing everything perfectly. For a moment, I thought, maybe she really is good for our family. That thought was short-lived. When I returned to the living room, I saw Leo coloring quietly in a corner. Veronica approached him, praising his drawing. The boy immediately dropped his crayon and moved away, like a frightened animal. Veronica looked at me with a forced smile. "Such a shy little boy," she said sweetly, but I noticed something cold in her eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. Michael, however, seemed enchanted, completely blind to any warning signs. As they said goodbye at the door, he looked at her as if he'd found an oasis after years in the desert. I stood there watching the car drive away with a strange feeling growing inside me, like a premonition. From that day on, Veronica became a constant part of our lives, showing up unannounced, bringing expensive gifts for Michael and toys for Leo that always ended up forgotten at the bottom of the closet. Slowly, she began changing our habits, our routines, infiltrating every space of our family. As the months passed, Veronica became an increasingly frequent presence in our home. She seemed to be everywhere, remodeling our family life like a decorator dissatisfied with the furniture arrangement. At first, I tried to convince myself that she just wanted to help, that she was trying to fit into our family, still fragile from grief. One sunny Saturday morning, I was knitting a scarf for the coming winter when Veronica appeared in the living room doorway. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'm going to take Leo for a walk in the park. Is that okay?" Her enthusiasm seemed excessive, almost theatrical. I looked at Leo, who was playing quietly with his wooden blocks on the rug. His face remained expressionless upon hearing the invitation, but I nodded. Of course, a little fresh air will do him good. When they returned a few hours later, Veronica entered triumphantly, as if she had won an Olympic medal. He had a blast. He wouldn't stop playing on the slide and even asked for more ice cream, she recounted animatedly. But Leo came in with his head down. His blue shirt, which I had carefully ironed that morning, was stained with dirt and something that looked like ketchup. More alarming than the stains was his silence. "Did you have fun, my love?" I asked, crouching down to be at his eye level. He just nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on the floor. Before I could ask more, Veronica chimed in. "I already told you he loved it, Mrs. Eleanor. Leo is just a little shy about expressing himself." That night, while I was bathing him, I noticed red marks on his arm, as if someone had gripped him tightly. "What happened here, Leo?" I asked gently. He just shook his head. "I fell at the park," he mumbled so quietly I almost didn't hear him. On another occasion, I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard voices in the living room. Michael had gone out to run errands at the bank, and Veronica had shown up unannounced, as had become her habit. At first, her voice sounded sweet as she spoke to Leo, but suddenly the tone changed drastically. "I told you not to touch that. Why do you have to be so clumsy? Clean up that mess now." The coldness in her voice made me freeze in the middle of chopping onions. I quickly left the kitchen, and as if by magic, Veronica returned to her syrupy tone. "Our Leo is so creative, isn't he? Look what a beautiful castle he's building." But my grandson's face told another story. His lips were pressed into a thin line, and there was a fear in his eyes that broke my heart. I tried to smile, nodding, as a suspicion grew inside me like a weed. I started to notice other signs. Leo, who had finally begun to open up after his mother's death, was closing off again. He stopped singing the songs he learned at school. His drawings, once colorful and full of life, were now predominantly dark, with harsh, angular strokes. The teacher called me after class one afternoon. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'm worried about Leo. He's been very quiet, isolated from his classmates. Last week, when a classmate dropped his pencil near him, he flinched as if expecting to be scolded." Her eyes conveyed genuine concern. "Is everything all right at home?" I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the doubt I'd been carrying. "We're just going through some changes," I replied vaguely. On the way home, Leo held my hand tighter than usual. Suddenly, he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and looked up at me with those huge eyes, so much like his mother's. "Grandma, I don't want to be alone with Aunt Veronica." His voice was almost a whisper, as if he was afraid of being overheard. I knelt on the sidewalk, ignoring the pain in my knees. "Why, my love? Did something happen?" He looked down, kicking at an imaginary pebble. "She gets angry when no one is looking. She says I'm a burden to Daddy." It was as if a hole opened up beneath my feet. I hugged him tightly, feeling his small body tremble against mine. "No one will ever hurt you, my love, I promise." The words came out firm, but inside I was falling apart. Lily, who had met us at the school gate, heard everything. I saw indignation rise in her face, her hands balling into fists. She knelt beside Leo and stroked his hair. "It's okay now, little one. We're here with you." That night, after Leo had fallen asleep, Lily and I spoke in hushed tones in the kitchen. "Aunt Eleanor, this can't go on. She's traumatizing Leo." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Michael needs to know what's happening." I sighed deeply. "Your cousin is in love, Lily. He sees Veronica as a chance to rebuild his life." I ran a hand through my gray hair. "I'm afraid he won't believe us, or worse, that he'll choose to stay with her." "And what if something serious happens to Leo?" Lily questioned, her voice trembling slightly. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. In the days that followed, I began to watch Veronica even more closely. I noticed how her smile never reached her eyes when she spoke to Leo, how she would first check if she was being watched before interacting with him, how her perfect nails would sometimes dig into his arm when she thought no one was looking. Michael, for his part, seemed rejuvenated. He was smiling again, making plans. "Mom, I'm thinking of proposing to Veronica," he confided one evening, his eyes shining with hope. My heart sank. How could I destroy that newfound happiness? But how could I remain silent knowing my grandson was suffering? Leo's 8th birthday was the day I knew for sure that something had to be done. Lily spent the whole morning baking a chocolate cake decorated with little superheroes, Leo's current passion. When she arrived with the cake, the boy's eyes lit up for the first time in months. "Aunt Lily, it's Spider-Man!" he exclaimed, running to hug her. She lifted him into her arms, covering his face with kisses. "I made it especially for you, my hero." The love between them was so palpable, it filled the room. Veronica arrived late in a dress far too sophisticated for a child's party. She brought a gift wrapped in expensive paper, which she handed to Leo with a distant pat on the shoulder and a "Happy birthday, champ," that sounded as sincere as a politician on the campaign trail. Leo opened the gift, a video game far too complex for his age, and thanked her politely before setting it aside and running back to Lily, who was waiting with another surprise, a sticker album he had wanted for months. I saw Veronica's face harden for an instant, her eyes narrowing as she watched the scene. In that moment, I was certain that she not only didn't love Leo, but she resented him. She resented the love Michael had for his son, the space the child occupied in our lives, the living reminder of Clara that he represented. When the guests began to leave, I approached Michael. "Son, we need to talk about Leo." I tried to keep my voice calm. I've noticed he seems scared around Veronica. Michael frowned. "Mom, don't start. Veronica is trying so hard to get close to him. Leo is the one who needs to give her a chance." His defensive tone surprised me. Besides, he hesitated, looking around to make sure we were alone. I'm going to propose to her next week." The words fell like a sentence. I realized I had missed my chance to warn him. Now, all I could do was protect Leo, while I figured out a way to prove what I already knew in my heart. Veronica was a threat to our family. The marriage proposal took place in an expensive restaurant downtown. Michael spared no expense. Champagne, a violinist, a diamond ring. When he came home that night, his eyes were shining like I hadn't seen them in years. "She said yes, Mom," he announced, hugging me tightly. "We're getting married in 2 months." I forced a smile while my stomach twisted into knots. "So soon, son?" I tried to sound casual, concerned only with the logistics. Wouldn't it be better to wait a little longer to organize everything properly? "Veronica already has everything planned," he explained enthusiastically. "She knows an amazing event planner. It's going to be a perfect wedding, Mom. Exactly what we need to start over as a family." The words echoed in my mind as he went upstairs to tell Leo the news. I followed him silently, stopping at my grandson's bedroom door to watch the scene. Leo was sitting on his bed, clutching the old teddy bear Clara had given him on his last birthday. Michael knelt in front of him, holding his small hands. "Son, I have amazing news. Aunt Veronica is going to marry me. She's going to live with us and be your new mom. Isn't that wonderful?" The boy's face went pale, his eyes, always so expressive, filled with something I immediately recognized as pure terror. He didn't say a word, just nodded mechanically like a little robot programmed to please. Michael didn't notice, or chose not to notice, his son's reaction. He affectionately ruffled his hair and left the room, passing me with a radiant smile. "He'll get used to it, Mom. Kids adapt." When I entered the room, Leo was sitting in the exact same position, as if frozen in time. "Grandma," his voice was barely audible. "Am I going to have to be alone with her every day now?" My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "No, my love. I will always be here for you." I hugged him tightly, feeling his small body tremble against mine. Always. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Veronica took complete control of the wedding, transforming it into a grand event worthy of celebrities. The most luxurious venue in the city was booked. Florists were emptied. A renowned chef was hired to create a sophisticated menu. She appeared at the house daily with catalogs, samples, and guest lists. Everything had to be perfect, flawless, worthy of a magazine. Amidst this frenzy, Leo became increasingly invisible. When he was present in the conversations, it was only as an accessory, a detail to be dealt with. "Leo needs a new suit," Veronica commented one afternoon, as if talking about a mannequin. "Navy blue will match the wedding's color palette, and we need to cut that hair. He looks like a little savage." The boy, sitting quietly in a corner of the room with his toy car, visibly flinched. His eyes met mine, pleading for protection. "I'll take him to his usual barber," I replied firmly, "and he has a nice suit I bought him for Christmas. It's practically new." Veronica rolled her eyes. "Mrs. Eleanor, this isn't just any birthday party. It's my wedding. Everything has to be perfect." The way she emphasized "my" did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, while Michael was at work, Veronica took Leo to try on the suit. When they returned, the boy ran straight to my room, where he found me folding laundry. "What happened, my love?" I asked, sitting down, noticing his tear-streaked cheeks. "She pinched me hard in the fitting room," he whispered, showing me small red marks on his arm. "She said if I tell Daddy, no one will believe me because I'm just a little liar." My blood boiled. "Leo, that's not true. You have never been a liar." "She also said," his voice broke, "that when they get married, they're going to send me to a boarding school far away from here. That Daddy already agreed." It was like taking a punch to the gut. I hugged him tightly, my own tears threatening to fall. "That will never happen, my love. I promise." That night, after Leo had fallen asleep, I confronted Michael in the kitchen. "Son, is it true you're thinking of sending Leo to a boarding school?" He looked at me, surprised. What are you talking about, Mom? Leo told me that Veronica mentioned sending him away after the wedding. Michael sighed heavily. Mom, he must have misunderstood. Veronica just mentioned that there are excellent full-time schools we could consider in the future. Nothing has been decided. Michael, your son is terrified. Don't you see what's happening? Ever since Veronica came into our lives, Leo has completely changed. He's withdrawn, scared. She hurts him when you're not looking. Enough! Michael slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. I'm tired of these insinuations. Veronica is bending over backwards to create a family with us, and you just keep putting up roadblocks. Leo needs to adapt to this new reality, and so do you, Mom. I was left speechless, watching my son leave the kitchen. I had never seen him like this, so blind, so willing to ignore the signs that were right in front of him. In that moment, I realized it was useless to try to convince him. He was completely under Veronica's spell. I told Lily about the conversation the next morning. We were in the garden, away from Leo's ears, who was watching cartoons in the living room. This is unbearable, Auntie. She ran her hands through her hair, clearly distressed. Michael can't be that blind. Love does that, Lily. He thinks he's found a second chance. She looked at me intensely. Sometimes I wonder if he really loves her, or if he's just running from the loneliness, from the grief. There was a deep sadness in her voice that confirmed my suspicions about her feelings. I think even he doesn't know the answer, I replied softly. In the week leading up to the wedding, Lily started coming over every day. She brought little surprises for Leo, a new book, a collectible car, homemade cookies. Her presence was like a ray of sunshine on increasingly gloomy days. One afternoon, while Leo played in the garden under my watch, I found Lily in the kitchen, crying silently as she washed the dishes. "What's wrong, dear?" I asked, placing my hand on her shoulder. She tried to hide it, quickly wiping her eyes. "It's nothing, Auntie." "Lily, I've known you since you were a child. I know when something's wrong." She took a deep breath, her shoulders trembling slightly. It hurts to see Michael making this terrible mistake, and it hurts even more knowing that Leo is going to suffer because of it." She paused, biting her lip. "And maybe it hurts a little because I've always—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. I hugged her gently. "I know, my dear, I've always known." On the eve of the wedding, as I was helping Leo try on his suit one last time, he asked me a question that took my breath away. "Grandma, if I get sick tomorrow, really, really sick, I won't have to go to the wedding, right?" I looked into those innocent eyes, so full of fear and desperation, and I felt my determination harden. No matter what happened, I would not let him suffer anymore. "Don't you worry, my love. Grandma will be with you the whole time tomorrow. Nothing bad is going to happen." Little did I know how prophetic that promise would become. The wedding morning dawned with a perfect blue sky, as if nature itself was conspiring for Veronica's special day. The chosen venue was a stunning hall with enormous windows that let in the golden sunlight, illuminating the arrangements of white roses and orchids that decorated every table. I was helping Leo get ready in one of the side rooms of the hall. He wore the navy blue suit Veronica had insisted on, looking even smaller and more vulnerable in the formal attire. His little hands trembled as I adjusted his bow tie. "Are you okay, my love?" I asked, kneeling to be at his eye level. He nodded mechanically, but his gaze was distant, lost. "Grandma, after today, will Aunt Veronica live in our house forever?" His voice was almost a whisper. I felt my heart clench. "We'll take it one day at a time, okay? Today you just need to worry about staying close to me or Aunt Lily." I forced a reassuring smile, though inside I was falling apart. The guests began to arrive, filling the hall with lively chatter and exclamations about the lavish decor. Michael circulated among them, elegant in his gray suit, with a smile I hadn't seen on his face since before Clara's death. A part of me wanted to be happy for him, for this second chance at life. But the other part, the part that had witnessed the terror in Leo's eyes, remained on high alert. Veronica was in a separate room, surrounded by bridesmaids who looked more like assistants, adjusting every detail of her elaborate wedding gown. Through the ajar door, I could see her giving orders, her face tense like someone who would not tolerate any mistake on her perfect day. Lily arrived wearing a simple sea green dress that enhanced her eyes. She came straight to us, kneeling to hug Leo tightly. "My little hero, you look so handsome," she exclaimed, tickling his stomach. It was the first time that day I saw a genuine smile on his face. We were led to the table designated for the immediate family. Table 8, right in the center of the hall, meticulously decorated like all the others, but strategically positioned so everyone could see the happy new family that was about to be formed. The ceremony was brief and flawless, like everything Veronica planned. She entered, dazzling, drawing gasps from the guests. Michael waited for her at the makeshift altar, his eyes shining with emotion. Leo stood beside him, holding the rings, his small figure rigid as a statue. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the hall erupted in applause. I watched the couple kiss with a sense of unreality, as if I were watching a movie where I knew something terrible was about to happen, but was powerless to stop it. The reception began shortly after. A jazz band played softly while waiters circulated with glasses of champagne and trays of elaborate appetizers. Leo sat between Lily and me at table 8, playing quietly with a small red toy car he had brought hidden in his pocket. "That's a very nice car," I commented, trying to distract him from his visible discomfort. "Mommy gave it to me," he replied in a low voice, as if sharing a secret, "for my 4th birthday." I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. That little piece of painted metal was his link to Clara, a tangible memory of the love she had for him. I discreetly dabbed my eyes and smiled at Leo. The waiters began to serve dinner. Sophisticated dishes, presented with artistic perfection, were placed before us. I noticed that Leo's plate looked slightly different from the others. "What are you going to eat, dear?" I asked casually, though a silent alarm started to ring in my mind. He pushed his fork around the plate, carefully separating the food. "I'm not very hungry," he answered quietly. Lily leaned over, examining his plate. "It looks delicious, but if you're not hungry, you don't have to eat it all. Just try a little bit." It was then that I noticed the waiter, a young man with a kind face named Daniel, glancing nervously towards our table while talking to another staff member. There was something in his expression, a mix of confusion and concern, that instantly put me on edge. Leo was still playing with his red car, pushing it back and forth on the white tablecloth. Suddenly, the toy slipped and fell to the floor, rolling under the table. He quickly bent down to retrieve it. It was in that moment that everything changed. Leo froze under the table, his eyes fixed on something on the floor. When he finally re-emerged, his face was as pale as paper. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice trembling with fear, "I want to go home now." My heart raced. "What's wrong, my love?" He grabbed my hand tightly, his small fingers icy against my skin. "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" I felt a chill run down my spine. I slowly pretended to drop my napkin, and as I bent down, I discreetly lifted the corner of the white tablecloth. There, almost hidden by the shadow, was a small folded piece of paper. Reaching out, I quickly snatched it and straightened up. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper under the table, away from prying eyes. The handwriting was rushed, almost illegible, but the words leaped out at me like embers. Table 8. Add shellfish to the child's portion. The air froze in my lungs. Leo had a severe allergy to shellfish, an allergy that could be fatal. A single bite would be enough to trigger a reaction that, without immediate attention, could cost him his life. The whole family knew about this. Michael had been obsessively careful with his son's diet ever since we discovered the allergy when Leo was just 3 and nearly died after an allergic reaction at a restaurant. I looked at the untouched plate in front of my grandson. There were small, camouflaged pieces among the other foods. Minced shellfish, almost imperceptible, mixed into the sauce and herbs. The horror of the situation hit me like a high-speed train. This was not an accident. It wasn't a kitchen error. It was a deliberate attempt to harm, or worse, an innocent child. "Leo," I whispered urgently, "don't touch the food, not a single bite." He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. He knew. Somehow, this 8-year-old boy had sensed the danger before any of us. I looked at Lily, who noticed my expression and immediately leaned in. "What is it?" she murmured worriedly. I discreetly passed her the paper under the table. I saw her face pale as she read it, her eyes widening in shock and then narrowing with a fury I had never seen before. "We have to get out of here," she said, her voice tense and low. "Now." I nodded, holding Leo's hand firmly. "Let's go to the restroom, dear," I said aloud for anyone who might be listening. "You need to wash your hands before eating." We stood up calmly, trying not to draw attention. Leo between us, protected like a precious treasure. As we were almost at the door, I saw the young waiter, Daniel, watching us with a strange expression, a mix of relief and fear. In the hallway outside the hall, away from the eyes of the guests, Lily grabbed my arm. "Aunt Eleanor," she said, her voice trembling with indignation, "this is attempted murder. We have to call the police." I looked at Leo, who was trembling like a leaf in the wind, clutching my skirt. "First, we need to make sure he's safe, then we'll deal with the rest." We went to the hotel reception, where I quickly explained the situation to the manager, omitting my suspicions about who might be behind it. He immediately provided us with a private room where we could wait while we decided what to do. Leo curled up on a sofa, hugging his red car like a protective amulet. Lily sat beside him, putting a protective arm around his shoulders, while I paced back and forth, trying to organize my thoughts. "We need to find out where that note came from," I said finally, "and who wrote it." "I know who it was," Leo said suddenly, his voice small but firm. "I saw Aunt Veronica give a paper to the girl in the pink dress." "Grace," Lily murmured, "her younger sister." Something cold and determined settled inside me, a certainty that went beyond anger or fear. It was a resolve that, no matter the cost, I would expose the truth and protect my grandson. "I'm going to talk to Daniel, the waiter," I decided. He seemed nervous, like he knew something. "And I'll stay here with Leo," Lily said, pulling the boy closer to her. "I won't leave him alone for a second." I left the room with a clear purpose. I was no longer just a worried grandmother. I was a woman on a mission. I found Daniel near the kitchen, organizing trays. When he saw me, he paled and looked like he was about to flee. "Wait," I asked, my voice firmer than I felt. "I need to talk to you." He glanced nervously to the sides. "Ma'am, I'm working." "It's about this." I showed him the folded paper. "Do you know what this is?" His hands started to tremble. I don't know." "Daniel," I moved closer, lowering my voice. "My grandson has a fatal allergy to shellfish. This note could have cost him his life. If you know anything, please help me." Something in my plea seemed to affect him. His shoulders slumped, and he sighed deeply. "A girl gave it to me," he confessed. "She said it was a special instruction from the chef. I was supposed to deliver it to the kitchen, but I accidentally dropped it when I was carrying the plates. I swear I didn't know what was written on it." "Which girl?" I pressed, though I already suspected the answer. "The bride's sister, the one in the pink dress." It all fit. The final piece of the puzzle was revealed, exposing a picture of malice I could barely comprehend. How could someone try to hurt an innocent child, and on her own wedding day? "Thank you for telling me," I told Daniel. "You may have saved my grandson's life today." I returned to the room where Lily and Leo were waiting, my mind already formulating the next step. It was time to expose the truth, no matter how painful it was. "Auntie, what did you find out?" Lily asked as soon as I entered. "Enough," I replied, my gaze fixed on Leo, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep on her lap. It's time to end this charade. When I returned to the hall, the party was in full swing. The band was playing lively music, couples were dancing on the floor, and laughter flowed along with the expensive chilled wine Veronica had personally chosen. Michael circulated among the guests, beaming as I hadn't seen him in years, proudly introducing his new wife. Veronica was stunning in her wedding dress, smiling for the cameras, accepting congratulations with the rehearsed grace of an actress receiving an award. In the distance, I saw Grace, the younger sister, in a corner of the hall. Her face was tense, her eyes nervously checking the clock as if she were waiting for something to happen. I clenched the small paper in my hand, feeling it burn like a hot coal. My first impulse was to run to Michael and show him the proof of the monstrosity he had just married. But I held back. I had to be methodical. I needed irrefutable evidence, or I would risk losing my son forever. I discreetly approached Grace, who flinched when she saw me. "Mrs. Eleanor," she stammered, "where's Leo? Is everything all right?" "You know it's not," I replied, keeping my voice low but firm, "and I think you know exactly why." The little color left in her face drained away. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am," she murmured, her eyes darting away from mine. "This paper," I showed her the folded note, "was found under our table. You gave it to Daniel, didn't you? On your sister's orders." Grace began to tremble, her eyes filling with tears. She was just a girl, I realized, not much more than a teenager, easily manipulated by her older sister. "She said it was just a joke," she finally whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "She said Leo was a spoiled brat who needed to learn a lesson. I didn't know." I swear I didn't know about the allergy. I felt a wave of pity mixed with horror. "Grace, do you understand what could have happened if Leo had eaten that shellfish?" She covered her face with her hands, sobbing silently. "My sister. She's always been like this. She gets whatever she wants, no matter how. When we were little, she stopped abruptly, as if she had said too much. "What? What did she do?" Grace hesitated, then continued in a whisper. "There was a puppy I loved. She poisoned it because it tore one of her dresses. She told everyone it ate something on the street." Tears streamed down her face. "I never told anyone. She made me promise. She said no one would believe me anyway." A chill ran down my spine. The picture that was forming was darker than I had imagined. We weren't just dealing with jealousy or resentment. There was something deeply disturbed about Veronica, a capacity for calculated cruelty that terrified me. "Grace, I need your help," I said, holding her trembling hands. "For Leo, for your future nephew." She looked at me, guilt and fear warring in her face. Finally, she nodded. "What do I have to do?" "Just tell the truth when the time comes." I sought out Daniel next, who nervously agreed to testify about the note. With these pieces in hand, I finally felt ready to confront the situation. I returned to the private room where Lily was waiting with Leo. "It's all set," I announced. "We're ending this now." Leo, now awake but still scared, grabbed my hand. "Grandma, I'm scared." I knelt in front of him, holding his small face in my hands. "My love, do you remember when I told you about heroes? About how they feel fear, but they still do what's right?" He nodded slowly. "Today, the three of us are going to be heroes. We're going to protect each other, just like a real family does." When we entered the hall, the music had stopped. It was time for the speeches. Michael stood with a microphone in his hand, about to make a toast to his new wife. His eyes found ours, first with relief at seeing us, then with confusion at our serious expressions. "Mom, where were you? Is everything okay?" he asked as we approached. I took a deep breath. "No, Michael, nothing is okay." My voice came out louder than I intended, drawing curious glances. "We need to talk now." Veronica quickly materialized at his side, her perfect smile revealing a tension at the corners. "What happened, Mrs. Eleanor? Is there a problem with Leo?" "Yes," I replied, meeting her gaze directly. "Someone tried to poison my grandson with shellfish, someone who knows very well about his deadly allergy." A murmur of shock rippled through the hall. Michael went pale, instinctively crouching to examine his son. "What are you talking about, Mom?" I showed him the note, now unfolded for everyone to see. This paper was found under our table, a specific instruction to add shellfish to Leo's plate. Michael took the paper, his eyes widening in horror as he read it. This must be a terrible mistake. No one would do this on purpose. Ask Daniel." I pointed to the young waiter who had timidly approached. He received the note from Grace. All eyes turned to Veronica's sister, who was visibly trembling in a corner, silent tears streaming down her face. Veronica quickly intervened, her voice sweet but with a hint of desperation. "This is absurd. There's obviously been a misunderstanding. Grace would never do something like that. Right, dear?" Grace looked from her sister to me, then to Leo, who was partially hiding behind Lily. Something seemed to break inside her. "It was Veronica," she said finally, her voice small but clear. "She wrote the note and asked me to give it to Daniel. She said it was just a joke to scare Leo." The entire hall fell into absolute silence. Veronica let out a forced laugh. "Grace, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous." "It's not the first time," Grace continued, gaining courage. "When we were kids, she poisoned my puppy because it ruined her dress. She always hurts anyone who gets in her way." The guests began to murmur, looking in horror from Veronica to Leo. Michael was paralyzed, his face a mask of disbelief and pain. "Veronica!" He turned slowly to his wife. "Say it's not true. Say you would never try to hurt my son." For a moment, I saw Veronica's mask of perfection falter. Her eyes flashed with something cold and calculating before she quickly composed her expression into one of shock and hurt. "Michael, how can you believe these accusations? Your own mother has never accepted me, and now she's making up these lies to tear us apart." "Lies?" Lily stepped forward, shielding Leo behind her. "How do you explain the pinch marks you left on him in the fitting room? How do you explain telling him he'd be sent to boarding school after the wedding? Or the times you cruelly scolded him when you thought no one was listening?" I added. "The little terrors you planted in him day after day." Veronica looked around, finding herself surrounded not only by us, but by the increasingly hostile gazes of the guests. Her composure began to visibly crumble. "You people don't understand." Her voice rose an octave. "That child is a burden, always crying for his dead mother, always in the way. Michael would never be completely mine as long as—" She stopped abruptly, realizing what she had said. Michael recoiled as if he had been slapped, his face contorting in horror. "As long as what, Veronica? As long as my son was alive? That's not what I meant." She tried to backtrack, reaching a hand toward him. "Michael, you have to believe me. I love you. We can be happy together." "Happy?" he repeated in disbelief. "You tried to kill my son on our wedding day. What kind of monster does that?" Something in Veronica's eyes shifted. The mask fell away completely, revealing a coldness that made me shiver. "A monster created by people like you," she hissed, her beautiful face twisting. "Who cling to the past, who can't move on. She's dead, Michael, dead, and that brat is just an anchor dragging you down." A stunned silence fell over the hall. Veronica looked around, realizing too late what she had done. Her shoulders slumped, and she began to laugh, a hysterical, almost manic sound. "You don't understand," she said between sobs and laughter. "I deserve to be happy. I deserve to have him all to myself. I've always gotten everything I wanted. Always." 2 hotel security guards discreetly approached, positioning themselves near her. Michael, still in shock, finally reacted. He walked to Leo and scooped him up into his arms, hugging him fiercely. "I'm so sorry, son," he whispered, his voice choked. "Forgive me for not seeing, for not protecting you." Leo snuggled against his father's chest, sobbing quietly. "It's okay, Daddy. Grandma and Aunt Lily protected me." Michael looked up at the two of us, his expression a mixture of gratitude and shame. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for saving my son when I couldn't." Lily touched his arm gently. "Let's go home, Michael. This party is over." As we headed for the exit under the stunned gaze of the guests, Veronica was discreetly escorted to another area by the security guards. Her voice still echoed through the hall, a mix of pleas and accusations, a dissonant symphony of a disturbed soul. In the car on the way home, Leo quickly fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional whirlwind. Michael drove in silence, occasionally wiping away discreet tears. "How could I have been so blind?" he finally murmured. "How did I not see what was happening right under my nose?" "Love blinds us sometimes," I replied softly. "You wanted to believe you had found happiness again." "At the cost of my own son." His voice broke. "What kind of father does that make me?" Lily, sitting in the back with Leo, leaned forward. "A human father, Michael. One who made mistakes, but who can still fix things." He glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting hers. Something silent passed between them, an understanding, perhaps even the beginning of a possibility I had seen growing for years. I looked out the window, watching the city lights blur past like shooting stars. The nightmare was over, but I knew the healing would be a long process. Deep wounds had been opened, traumas had been created, but I also knew, with the certainty only a grandmother can have, that our little family would come out stronger on the other side. Because in the end, it wasn't blood ties or wedding vows that saved us. It was true love, the kind that protects, that sees beyond appearances, the kind that stands firm even in the darkest of times, the kind of love that doesn't need white dresses or diamond rings to prove its strength. The days following the wedding disaster were a blur of emotions and difficult decisions. Michael filed for an immediate annulment, citing fraud and bad faith. We also filed a police report against Veronica for the attempted poisoning of Leo. Our home, once a minefield of silent tensions, now seemed shrouded in a cloud of renewed grief. Michael became a shadow, moving through the rooms like a ghost, carrying the weight of guilt and shame. Leo, for his part, started having nightmares. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, calling for me or his father. On one of those nights, as I was calming Leo after a particularly intense nightmare, Michael appeared at the bedroom door, his eyes red with unshed tears. "Can I?" he asked hesitantly, gesturing to the bed where I was holding Leo against my chest. I nodded, shifting to make room for him. Michael sat beside us, gently stroking his son's hair. "I had a bad dream, Daddy," Leo murmured sleepily. "Aunt Veronica was in my room watching me." Michael swallowed hard, silent tears rolling down his face. "It was just a dream, son. She will never come near you again, I promise." "Do you swear for real?" Leo's eyes searched his father's face for the security he so desperately needed. "I swear on my life," Michael replied with a conviction that left no doubt. When Leo finally fell back asleep, we sat in silence for a while, watching his rhythmic breathing, his small chest rising and falling under the superhero blanket. "How was I so unable to see, Mom?" Michael finally broke the silence, his voice little more than a whisper. "The signs were all there." I sighed, choosing my words carefully. "After Clara was gone, you were lost for so long. Veronica appeared like a light at the end of the tunnel. It's understandable that you clung to that hope. At the cost of not noticing my own son's suffering." He shook his head, self-disgust evident in every word. "What kind of father does that?" "A human father," I repeated the words Lily had said in the car. One who now has the chance to make things right. In the following days, Michael dedicated himself completely to rebuilding Leo's trust. He took a leave of absence from work, spending hours playing with his son, taking him for walks, and sitting with him to do his homework. Little by little, I saw the bond between them strengthen, like a plant that was finally receiving the water it needed. Lily became an even more constant presence in our lives. She came over every day after work, bringing little surprises for Leo, a new book, a toy car for his collection, homemade cookies. Her devotion to the boy was touching, and I often found her reading him stories or teaching him how to assemble complicated puzzles. One afternoon, as I watched the three of them in the yard, Michael pushing Leo on the swing while Lily filmed, laughing at the faces the boy was making, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. There they were. Not the perfect margarine commercial family that Veronica had tried to forge, but a real family, with scars and imperfections, bound together by genuine love. The investigation into the attempted poisoning progressed slowly. Grace, Veronica's sister, came forward as a witness, confirming that her sister had deliberately planned everything. Daniel, the waiter, also testified about the note he had received. The evidence was overwhelming. When we received the news that Veronica had been formally charged, Michael and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset as Leo played with his red car on the lawn. "Do you think she'll go to prison?" Michael asked, his voice neutral, almost detached. "Probably," I replied. "The evidence is solid." He nodded slowly. "You know, as terrible as all this was, on some level, I feel like we were saved. If she had managed to hide her true nature for longer." He left the sentence unfinished, but I understood perfectly. If we hadn't found out in time, who knows what could have happened to Leo? The thought was unbearable. "Did you really love her?" I asked softly, a question I had been holding on to for weeks. Michael was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was slowly dipping between the distant buildings. "I think I loved the idea of her," he finally answered. "The promise of a new life, of leaving the pain behind. But now, looking back, I don't know if I ever really knew her at all." That night, after Leo had fallen asleep, I found Lily in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes. Her hands moved mechanically over the plates, but her eyes were distant, lost in thought. "A penny for your thoughts," I said, picking up a towel to dry. She smiled shyly. "I was just thinking about how life turns. A few weeks ago, we were all preparing for a wedding. Now we're rebuilding," I completed, piece by piece. Lily nodded, passing me another plate. "Leo is getting better. He had a real laugh today. That uncontrollable, childish kind. It's been so long since I've heard it." "Thanks in large part to you," I observed. "You've been an anchor for him, for all of us, really." She blushed slightly, looking away. "It's the least I can do. You're my family." I placed my hand on hers, stopping her movement. "Lily, I know we've never talked about this, but your feelings for Michael aren't exactly a secret to me." Her face turned completely red, and she opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand to silence her. "I'm not judging. Far from it. In fact, I've always thought that you, too—" I left the sentence hanging in the air, watching her reaction. "Aunt Eleanor," she stammered, "Michael just went through a terrible trauma. He needs time to heal. Besides, he only sees me as a cousin, almost a sister." "Maybe," I agreed, "or maybe he just hasn't realized what's right in front of him yet." She smiled sadly. "Some things aren't meant to be, Auntie, and that's okay. The important thing is that Leo is safe and happy." Her selflessness left me thoughtful. As I got ready for bed, I reflected on how true love manifests in such different ways. The obsessive, possessive love of Veronica, who was capable of destroying to get what she wanted, and the altruistic, patient love of Lily, who put the happiness of others above her own. The months passed, and our little family slowly found a new rhythm. Leo once again became the cheerful, curious boy he was before, his eyes regaining the sparkle they had lost. Michael transformed as a father, establishing a connection with his son that he had never had before. And I started breathing again without that constant weight on my chest, that suffocating worry that had accompanied me for so long. Veronica's trial took place 6 months after the incident. We chose to spare Leo the process, but Michael, Lily, and I attended every hearing. Seeing Veronica in the defendant's chair, dressed in simple clothes instead of the elegant suits she always wore, was surreal. Her face, once animated by a calculated smile, was now empty, almost apathetic. Only her eyes retained that calculating coldness that had always sent shivers down my spine. The defendant is found guilty of aggravated attempted murder against a minor, the judge announced after the jury's deliberation, sentencing her to 12 years in prison. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness as I watched Veronica being led away by the guards. There was no joy in justice being served, only the feeling of a dark chapter finally being closed. On the way home, Michael drove in silence, his expression unreadable. Lily, sitting beside me in the back seat, held my hand discreetly, offering silent support. "It's over," Michael finally spoke, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "It's really over." "Yes," I replied softly. "Now we can move on." That night, after telling a softened version of the trial's outcome to Leo, my grandson asked me to stay by his side until he fell asleep. Lying next to him in his small bed, I watched his little face gradually relax, his long eyelashes resting on his rosy cheeks. "Grandma," he murmured sleepily, "Mommy Clara is watching over me from heaven, right?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yes, my love, she's always watching over you." "And Aunt Lily watches over me here on earth, too," he continued, his eyes already closed, "like a second mommy." I remained silent, reflecting on the simple, profound wisdom of that child. Children see what adults often cannot, I thought. They perceive true love, even when it's disguised as friendship or companionship. Spring arrived, bringing new beginnings with it. Leo had entered a phase of fascination with plants, so we transformed a corner of the yard into his personal garden. Every day after school, he would run to check on the growth of his cherry tomatoes and lettuce. On one of those afternoons, while helping Leo water his seedlings, I noticed Michael and Lily talking on the other side of the garden. They were sitting on the old wooden swing, very close to each other, their heads tilted in intimate conversation. Suddenly, I saw Michael touch Lily's face with a gentleness that spoke more than any words. Leo followed my gaze and smiled. "Daddy is happy near Aunt Lily," he observed with the direct simplicity of childhood. "Me too." I nodded, unable to reply due to the emotion tightening my throat. Sometimes, I thought, we need to go through fire to find our way home. We need to know falsehood to recognize what is genuine. The romance between Michael and Lily blossomed slowly, like a carefully nurtured plant. There were no grand declarations or dramatic gestures, just the gradual acknowledgement of a love that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to bloom. One evening, almost a year after the wedding disaster, we were all in the living room after dinner. Leo was playing with his building blocks on the rug. Lily was helping Michael review work reports, and I was knitting quietly, enjoying the domestic peace that enveloped us. Leo suddenly lifted his head from his toy. "Aunt Lily, are you going to be my mom now?" he asked with the shocking frankness that only children possess. The entire room froze. Lily blushed deeply, while Michael looked at his son in astonishment. Holding my breath, I awaited the outcome of this unexpected scene. "Leo," Michael began hesitantly, "why do you ask that?" The boy shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. "Because you love each other, and because Aunt Lily already takes care of me like a mom. All that's missing is for her to live here with us." Michael and Lily exchanged an intense look, a silent conversation happening between them. Finally, Michael knelt beside his son. "Leo, would you like it if Aunt Lily were your mom?" he asked gently. The boy nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, she makes the best hot chocolate in the world, and she never gets mad when I make a mistake on my homework." Michael laughed, his eyes teary. "Those are excellent reasons." He looked at Lily, who was watching the scene with eyes shining with emotion. "What do you think, Lily? Do you want to be an official part of our family?" It wasn't a traditional marriage proposal. There was no ring, no bended knee, but it was filled with a love so genuine it made me hold my breath. Lily joined them on the rug, hugging Leo tightly before looking at Michael. "I'm already part of this family," she replied in a choked voice, "but yes, I would love to make it official." Leo let out a whoop of joy and wrapped his arms around her neck. "Can I call you Mama Lily now?" She kissed his forehead, tears streaming freely down her face. "You can call me whatever you want, my love. I've already loved you like a son for a very long time." From my silent spot on the sofa, I watched this scene with an overflowing heart. I thought of Clara, of how she would have approved of this union. I thought of Veronica and the blatant contrast between the possessive love that destroys and the generous love that builds. And I thought about how, sometimes, families are not formed by blood or by grand ceremonies, but by daily choices of love and protection. Michael's second wedding was as different from his first as day is from night. There was no luxurious hall, no orchestra, no extravagant wedding dress. Instead, we chose our own backyard, decorated simply with fairy lights and wildflowers. The guests were just close family and a few dear friends. Leo, wearing a blue suit he had chosen himself, was the ring bearer, carrying the rings with immense pride stamped on his face. Lily was radiant in a simple champagne-colored lace dress. There was no veil hiding her face, no mask of perfection, only her genuine smile and shining eyes of true happiness as she walked towards Michael, who waited for her under the old oak tree. "I never thought I would find love again," Michael said during his vows, his voice choked with emotion, much less that it had been by my side all along. Lily smiled through her tears. "I loved you in silence for so long," she replied, "that being able to say it out loud feels like a miracle." When they kissed, sealing the union, Leo ran and squeezed between them, hugging both their legs. Michael lifted him into his arms, and the three of them embraced as everyone applauded. It wasn't the perfect picture from a wedding magazine. It was better. It was real, imperfect, and absolutely true. During the small reception in the yard, with soft music playing and lights twinkling among the trees, I found a moment to be alone, watching my family from a distance. Michael and Lily were dancing slowly, their bodies close, whispering secrets to each other. Leo was running among the guests with other children, his laughter echoing through the night like music. "I'm so glad you're here to see this," a voice said beside me. It was Maria, Clara's older sister, who had come from out of town for the wedding. "It's like a circle closing, isn't it?" I replied, accepting the glass of champagne she offered me. "Clara would have approved," Maria commented softly, following my gaze to the dancing couple. She always loved Lily. She always said that if anything ever happened to her, she'd want Michael to move on with someone like Lily. I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. I know. Sometimes I feel like she somehow orchestrated all of this from above. Maria smiled. Who knows? Love has mysterious ways. Later that night, after the last guests had left and Leo had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from so much joy, I sat on the porch contemplating the stars. I thought about everything we had been through in the last 2 years, the pain, the fear, the betrayal, how we had been on the verge of a disaster that could have destroyed our family forever, and how, by some miracle of attention and love, we managed not only to survive, but to find a path to a deeper, truer happiness than before. I remembered the small folded note that had changed everything. Table 8, add shellfish to the child's portion. simple words that hid an unimaginable cruelty, but which, ironically, ended up saving us. If Leo hadn't seen that note, if I hadn't trusted his fears, if we had all remained blind for longer, the thought was unbearable. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually turning points in disguise, abysses that force us to look inward, to reevaluate, to change direction. Veronica was still serving her sentence. Occasionally, news about her would reach us through Grace, who had cut almost all contact with her sister, but still visited her a few times a year out of a sense of family obligation. Apparently, Veronica showed no remorse. She remained cold and distant, convinced that she had been unjustly treated. "She'll never change," Grace told me on one of the rare occasions we met. She truly believes she was right, that Leo was just an obstacle on her path to happiness. I shook my head, feeling more pity than anger at that point. What kind of happiness can be built on the suffering of an innocent child? I asked, more to myself than to her. Grace shrugged sadly. Veronica was always like that. Even when we were little, she couldn't see beyond her own desires. To her, people are just objects, either useful or obstacles. The idea was terrifying, and it made me grateful every day for the instinct that kept me on alert, for the courage Leo had to speak up about his fears, for the love Lily offered so generously, and for Michael's ability to finally see the truth, however painful it was. Months after the wedding, on a hot summer afternoon, Leo came running into the house, his face lit up by a huge smile. "Grandma, Mama Lily, Daddy, come and see." We followed his enthusiasm to the garden, where he was frantically pointing at a tomato plant. "Look, it worked, my first red tomato." There it was, small but perfectly red, the first fruit from the garden he had been cultivating with such dedication, a symbol so simple and powerful of new life, of patience rewarded, of constant care. Michael knelt beside his son, affectionately ruffling his hair. "It's beautiful, Champ. Should we pick it for dinner?" Lily joined them, her 5-month pregnant belly already visible under her light dress. "Our first garden tomato," she smiled, hugging Leo's shoulders. "A historic moment." I stood a few steps back, watching the 3, soon to be 4, members of this family that had been reborn from the ashes of despair. My heart overflowed with a silent gratitude for the journey we had traveled. That night, after Leo had fallen asleep and Michael and Lily had retired, I once again stayed on the porch, contemplating the stars. I thought about how our story could have taken such a different turn, how we were so close to tragedy, walking blindly toward the abyss. "Thank you," I whispered to the starry sky, to Clara, to the universe, to whatever force had guided us through that darkness. "Thank you for giving us the chance to see the truth in time. Because the truth, however painful, always sets you free. And true love, the kind that protects instead of possesses, that builds instead of destroys, that chooses the well-being of another above its own desires, that love is the greatest protection we can have against the shadows of the world." As I went inside to sleep, I passed by Leo's room. He was sleeping peacefully, his old red car still held securely in his hand. I smiled as I noticed that, next to the bed, there was now a framed photo. Michael, Lily, and Leo, smiling under the old oak tree. And next to it, never forgotten, never replaced, the photo of Clara hugging a baby Leo. It wasn't a competition of memories or loves. It was the continuation of a story. Different chapters of the same book of a family that had learned, in the hardest way possible, to recognize and value true love. And as I gently closed the door, I thanked once more for the small miracle that was that note found under the table, for the bravery of an 8-year-old boy who refused to remain silent, for the intuition that made me look beyond appearances, because sometimes saving a family is a matter of paying attention to the small signs, of trusting the whispers of the heart, of fiercely protecting those we love. Our story could have been a tragedy, but it was transformed into a testament to the power of true love. And that, I believe, is the most valuable lesson we could have ever learned. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video that appears on the screen, because in it, a tale of betrayal and revolt will surprise you like never before.